Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here's your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Well, good morning. I hope you're having a great Sunday morning wherever you happen to be. And thanks for joining us again for Faith in Our Hometown. I'm always pleased that you join us for a Sunday morning for a little bit of conversation about some of those things that might be of interest to those of us, of people of faith and goodwill here in the greater Joplin area. Excuse me, my guest this morning is going to be Joe Dellasaga, and we're going to be talking a little bit this morning about kind of a strange thing, and it may be a little bit more Catholic-centric than some of our other shows, but I hope you'll indulge me this morning. But in this context, we're going to talk about a Kansas boy who right now many people think was very saintly, and they want to try to get him named as a saint in the Catholic Church. We've had some history of some of those people working here in our area, and now they're trying to see whether or not Father Kapaun is going to be, whether he will be raised to the status of saint in the church. So we're going to be right back with Joe to talk about that after this Mercy Minute. Stick around. I hope that topic interests you, but stay with us for the next half hour.
I have arthritis in my knees, and it was just excruciating. I wish I would have done something sooner. I found myself not able to go up and down stairs, which is bad because we realized we were going to have to sell our house. We decided just to take the worst one first, and we did. I was back to work in 6 weeks. 6 months later, I had surgery on the second one, and I'm back to work in 5 weeks. And I was a little scared, a little apprehensive, even though I knew everything that was going to happen. But I was just impressed. Life is short, and I waited. I think I waited too long.
Well, again, thanks for joining us here for Faith in Our Hometown for another Sunday morning. My guest, Joe Dellasaga from over in the Pittsburgh area. And again, it's interesting. One of the things that that we talk about are saints, and so we talk a little bit about what a saint is, and the Christian scriptures at least talk about, and of course also in the Jewish and the Islamic tradition and the Hindu tradition, there are all these holy people that somehow wind up being shining examples for the people who practice faith in a particular way. And one of these holy people that people encountered in life was a priest from the Wichita, Kansas diocese, which is all of our Kansas territory that would pretty much be in our viewing area, the Wichita diocese. And in that context, there was a man who was from the Wichita area, grew up, went to school where I graduated from at Kenrick Seminary in St. Louis, and he went off where he came into notoriety was as a military chaplain. He served his men, and pretty soon he was one of those people that people would flock to because of his holiness, his way of approaching life. And so now there's a group that's trying to get him canonized, and a group that's trying to follow his example. And Joe's a part of that group over on the Kansas side. So Joe, tell us a little bit about how you came to get to know the story of Father Kapaun or Kapaun, which there's all different ways to say it. But tell us how you got involved with that story and what drew you in.
Sure, Father. Well, first of all, thank you so much for allowing us to share this story. It's very special, true to our hearts. Father Kapaun or Kapaun, and depending on who you talk to, it's pronounced differently. But basically, we grew up in the Diocese of Wichita.
I guess if that's whether you're speaking French or Kansas.
There you go.
I'm not sure which the case.
We speak Kansas,
there
right?
You go. Right.
But actually, he's from Pilsen, Kansas, and we kind of grew up with his legacy. We knew about Kapaun High School and Kapaun Mount Carmel, but recently, and over 12, 13 years ago, Father John Hotze was charged with actually taking that process and formalizing it, because to become a saint, it has to be sponsored by a bishop.
Right.
And that he assigned Father Hotze, who's just done an amazing job. And so part of that is spreading this story. So the more we live into the story, for us, the story got a real charge when, in 2011, Father Kapaun was signed as received the Medal of Honor. which put him on a national stage and made him one of the most highly decorated chaplains in the history of the military.
Yeah.
So for us personally, my son actually had an incident, near-death incident back in May 7th, 2011. And at the time, his cousin fell to his knees right there at the track, and where he had passed out, and started praying for the intercession of Father Kapaun, which our family had a devotion to. And from there, Nick is fine. We experienced our own personal miracle. Mm-hmm. He's doing well. But through that process, we were kind of invited into this Kapaun movement. What we found was the Kapaun Guild under Father Hotze's leadership out in Wichita has just done an amazing job of really pouring into the life of Father Kapaun, and to see all of the great things that he did, not only in the parish, but more importantly, during his military service when he was captured and lived in a concentration camp over in Korea.
Right. And interesting, again, there are all kinds of holy people that never wind up on the calendar, never wind up as one of the poster children for living the virtuous life, okay? And we've all known them, okay? We've all known holy people, we've experienced them in life and they're never going to wind up on this cause for saints. But because of his just position and how he got launched into this notoriety, that's why the folks over in Wichita said, well, we think there's something here that other people might be able to benefit from this. And so, again, people will ask us as Catholics all the time, well, why would you pray for his prayers? Why don't you just pray and everything? Well, yeah, we can pray, but the same way that you turn to your neighbors and you ask them for prayers, the same way we do that, not just people here on this side, but people on the other side. And we'll say, intercede for us, pray for us, say a prayer for me. We do that kind of stuff all the time. Say a prayer for me. And that's what we're asking for when we're asking for our saints, if you will, to pray for us,
I think what's been brought home to me is that we all are aspiring to live a life to be saints. And if we get to heaven, when we get to heaven, we are saints. Now, there are some saints that while they're here, the Catholic Church can hold them out as examples.
Right, poster children.
Exactly. So we're not praying to the saints, or that we are asking the saints to intercede for us.
Exactly. Yeah, and sometimes those are those things that I think get confusing for people because of the language we use as Catholics. Sorry, but but that's this whole thing. So tell us a little bit about his life. What are some of the things that you've discovered that just make him an example for you and the rest of the guys in your? Because this is basically a club, if you will, an organization that kind of is just dedicated to keeping his memory going.
Exactly.
So tell us what you've learned.
Well, it's very, once you kind of find to get into this process, this was one of the most humble men that you're going to find. He grew up in Pilsen on the wheat land. He was a farmer, and so Ray Kapaun, his nephew, would say, honestly, he said Father Kapaun would not want this kind of recognition. Right. He was that humble a man. A couple of stories that maybe really give you an insight into his heart. And I actually met Herb Miller. This was kind of the story told at the Medal of Honor ceremony over and over. And that is that when they had crossed the 38th parallel, they were surprised and ambushed by Korean and Chinese soldiers. He had the opportunity to go back, and he charged into battle. And that day when that battle was raging, they said he moved around like it was a Sunday afternoon at a church picnic, keeping his cool and ministering to the men that were in the middle of the fight. They were ultimately captured, and he was the one who worked with the physician to actually navigate the surrender, saving thousands of lives. When that was happening, Herb Miller had been hiding under a body. And a Korean soldier noticed him moving, and he pulled up the rifle and he held it to Mr. Miller's head. And all of a sudden, Father Kapaun broke away from the group that had been captured and walked up, and he just took and pushed the gun away. And Herb said he literally just pushed it, the gun just fell, and he picked him up and said, "Come on, soldier." And he carried him back over to the group. Herb Miller said he looked up, and the gun came back up, and the soldier just dropped the gun. From there, they went 60 miles to a concentration camp with him carrying or walking with Herb Miller the entire way. When they got in the camp, there were so many different things he did. He didn't sleep. He would go out and steal food for the prisoners. He was the one that he would get the prisoners to sing at night. And because what they would do is they put the officers up in this base camp, but down below would be the enlisted men. He would have the officers singing church songs and of any faith, but they could hear that music coming down, and it gave them the hope that we're doing okay, we're still there. The Chinese and the Korean officers hated Father Kapaun because he was the lifeblood of that prison. When President Obama at the Medal of Honor Center said that in that camp, the incident of death was almost 10% compared to the rest of the camps because of the hope that he instilled in those prisoners. And the last story I'd share with you, Father.
Oh, you can share as many as you want, as long as we can get them in a half an hour.
Fascinating. Well, thank you. Father Hotsey tells this story, and he actually talked to many of the men and the POWs. He went around and has spoken to every POW that he can find. And they said, I guess one way you would commit suicide in these prison camps is you would quit picking the lice off of your body. And the first day, nobody noticed. The second day, nobody noticed. By the third day, you'd be dead. And so people could check out. It was very painless. Father Kapaun would sit and hold a man and keep talking to him when he noticed that it was happening, and he would continue, but he would be picking the lice off of his head and off of his body in an effort to keep him. And he kept many men alive that watched that example. So he was there. He would wash their clothes. He was the servant to all. They said he could make a cathedral out of a mud hut. The other thing that I think is just amazing, this Kapaun's Men group we started is open to all faiths, because we're a group of men that are walking together. We're trying to be better fathers and better husbands and better leaders. And so what we're doing is trying to model what he would do, and by having not just Catholics but all men of all denominations, they say he would, when he was on the battleground, he could go and approach any man of any denomination, and he would pray with him and with his prayers. Yep. Really a unique position of that chaplain position.
Right, and that's what military chaplains are supposed to do and are trained to do. They don't just take care of their own. They're supposed to take care of all of the men and women who are in our armed forces. I mean, that's what the chaplain corps are trained in to do that. And so that he was able to, still take care of all the Catholics, but at the same time he was taking care of everybody of any faith.
It's right, exactly. When he died a year after being in the hut, they didn't get out until 3 years later, many of those same men that knew him. And as they were walking out, they were telling the story. They said, there was a Father Kapaun in this camp that you all need to know about. And many of the people that said he was Catholic or should be a saint were not Catholics.
Yeah, because they experienced that example.
Yeah.
And again, we've all had those examples in our lives, of people that just did extraordinary things. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things in the name of God, in the name of faith, in the name of goodness for their fellow human beings. That's one of those situations, and he obviously being one of those. So what does your club do? What's that all about? So you're open to people of all faiths.
We are.
So what do you guys do?
Yeah. So 10 years ago, we formed a group called That Man Is You, and then we began to realize that our curriculum was a little bit different. We needed to meet men where they were, and so we created our own group. We said we need to have a name, and because of Brandon Brill, Michael Ealing, some of the great guys that I work with, because of Nick's situation and our love for Father Kapaun, came up with Kapaun's Men. The reason, though, that our group is in Pittsburgh, Kapaun's Men started, but really we went on a retreat, and in the retreat we were challenged by Joe Ferris, the person who ran the retreat, said, how are you going to give this gift away? You have to give this gift away. So we began thinking what that could look like, and that was when we connected with the Diocese of Wichita. It's gone from a group of men getting together at 5:30 on Friday mornings, and about 60 to 70 men that show up every Friday, 13 weeks in the fall and the spring. But we've now grown to where the Diocese of Wichita, and this all couldn't have been possible if Father Hotsey, the Kapaun Guild, and they had not gotten involved with this.
Sure. Yeah.
And they've taken it from there, from one group of men to over 50 Kapaun's Men's groups.
In the Diocese of Wichita, or around the country?
And beyond. We have a group in South Korea.
Interesting.
And North Carolina and Georgia. And
interesting. Well, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to be right back after a short break. This is Faith in Our Hometown. Don't go away. I'll be right back with Joe Dellasaga.
Thank you.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
Well, again, thanks for being with us here on another Sunday morning. My guest this morning, Joe Dellasaga, from over in Pittsburgh, Kansas. Joe's with us this morning talking about a men's group, basically, that he belongs to, called Kapaun's Men, and about this cause to take Father Kapaun, who was a Catholic priest, one of the good ones, and basically to have him kind of promoted as one of the, kind of like stellar examples of living a good, virtuous Christian Catholic life.
Right.
And you said that there are now like 50 different groups around the country.
Right.
Who are kind of dedicated to his memory and kind of promoting his cause.
Exactly. When you had said something about being an organization, really we were organically started, and we're trying to keep it that way. So we don't have fast, hard rules and expectations. What we try to do, Father, is to gather men that under the spirituality of Father Kapaun and the guidance of the Holy Spirit, that we can work and walk with each other. And I think that's the key thing, and we do it through prayer and conversation and witness.
Well, and that's what his life was very much about. I mean, was prayer and conversation and witness, and that's what his life was as a military chaplain. Even under horrible and circumstances, that's who he was.
Yeah.
Promoting that.
It is, and it's great to see at our tables. We'll have a gentleman that's 88 years old, and we'll have somebody 21 years old just starting their college, or 130 that's got a child, all sitting at the same table and talking. And there's so much out there right now about the sex trafficking and how men can foster that. And a little story: we were in one of our sessions, and one of the guys talked that after he left Kapaun's Men that day, and we had a discussion about our role and responsibility with this very issue. And he was at work that day, and one of his friends sent a email that was not appropriate. Right. And he said, in the past, I would have either responded or deleted. And he said, this time I sent a note back and said, hey, you know what? That really isn't right, and we need to shut this down. And it was probably very difficult to email to send.
I mean, you don't like to challenge your friends when something's not right, but we need to.
Yeah, right. I think that courage that Father Kapaun had, we kind of draw that, and that also that warrior, because we are in a battle as men. We're good, inherently good, but at the same time, it is a battle that we're fighting.
Well, and I think again, this and other groups like it. Your group basically, focused around one, of the virtuous life of someone that you want to emulate and that you want to model, which is a good thing. But any kind of a men's group or, any kind of group, period. I mean, why do we think we have churches? Is that we're basically supporting each other in pursuing whatever we think our common goals are. Exactly. And how do we pursue those together? And so we band together based upon a creed or an organization or a church or a virtuous life of somebody, and obviously you guys are a group kind of supported by the Catholic Church, but obviously you have other members too. It's just one of those ways that we do that. And I think it's, I think you can live a virtuous life all by yourself. I think it's possible. I know there are people out there probably doing it every day, but I know that I personally find it easier when I get together with other people who see life the same way and just want to look at life through a certain lens and do that. It's
Father,
easier.
We started maybe the older version that we were doing this for accountability, which that's a good A word. We've moved though where we like more as accompaniment.
Oh yeah.
So we're walking with somebody, and that doesn't mean I have to know more than you. But it's like, hey, would you come pray for me? Or can we pray about that? Or what do you know about that? So it becomes a conversation. But at the end of the day, you both end up better. It's someplace better than when we started.
Yeah, and I love that. I think it's a great word. And I know it's becoming more of a, say a buzzword in ministry, but we're capturing something by it. And I think that that's a good thing when we start talking about accompaniment, that we're walking with each other on that journey through life. And to do that, again, very much a model of his life. It's interesting, if you wanted to know more about the life of Father Kapaun, there is a new book out. And obviously, you can get it through, any of those places that sells books. But the Miracle of Father Kapaun, Kapaun, okay, and in that context, it just basically tells the story of a heroic life. This is the kind of stuff that when I was little, I was raised in that era of, those great, World War II movies and all those kind of good stuff. Well, this one's more of a Korean War movie, okay? But, there were some great stories about men of virtuous life. and we don't have quite as many of those out today. But his was certainly a life that was worthy of his, I think, very worthy of his Medal of Honor. There's also, videotapes and things like that you can also get. And again, if any of those folks would want to hear more about that from your group, who would they contact, Joe? You or?
There's a website, www.caponsmen.org.
Okay.
And the other thing that we would love to do is if somebody wanted to start a men's group, we've learned a lot about that. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be a Kapaun's men's group. One of the things that we're trying to do is to spread the spirituality and the history of Father Kapaun, but also if we can help groups of any denomination get started.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to necessarily be group, but if you just wanted information about, modern day people who have done heroic things that, people might learn something from his life or his example. So www.kapaunsmen, so K-A-P-A-U-N-S, okay? Is there an apostrophe in there?
No, sir.
Okay, so Kapaunsmen, K-A-P-A-U-N-S-M-E-N, kapaunsmen.org. And you could find out more from that group, or if you wanted the materials or wanted to look at any of those things, certainly that's a possibility. So in terms of that, there's another little story that bleeds up into Kansas about another saint, Saint Rose Philippine Duchesne. And of course, she was another one of those virtuous women that worked actually in Kansas. When she first came to the United States, she begged and she begged and she begged. She wanted to come and work in the United States because, at that time the thinking was that so for example, the Native Americans didn't have souls. And she wanted to come because she wanted to spread the message of Jesus in this regard. So theology wasn't too good in those days because I think everybody would acknowledge now that there's just something inherent about the spirituality and the dignity of another human being that, whatever. But within that context, she wanted to share what she thought, what her whole life was special about, and that Jesus. Okay. So she wanted to come to the United States to share that. And she wound up living in the Florissant area where I'm from. And also St. Charles, and that's actually where she's buried, in St. Charles. We have a nice little icon of her in our church at St. Peter's because she's one of our diocesan patrons. Again, one of those people we look for help, okay? And she came and she lived among the Potawatomi in Kansas, and she couldn't learn the language. But the little kids watched her every day. So what she did was they'd go off to school and the other sisters were teaching the kids. She'd go off to school every day. She'd go to the chapel every day. And the little kids would put little acorns and everything on the hem of her habit because they didn't believe she could be there all day long. And when they came back from school and playing and doing all that stuff and they looked at her, the acorns and the little oak leaves and everything were still there on the hem of her habit, and so that's why they gave her the name. Now I can't say it in the Potawatomi language, but it's the woman who prays always. Yeah. That was the name that they gave her. Again, just another virtuous life. We Catholics are weird. We look at these people and we say, okay, look at the virtue of this life. And so she was a virtue. One of her virtues was praying nonstop. That most people would look at, kind of as a virtue, if you will. Yeah. But she wanted to just give her life for other people, much the same way he did. I think it's good that we encourage each other to give our lives. And again, that's the advantage of a men's group like yours, to say, hey, how do we encourage each other to be the best men we can be? I know we've got here, different groups. We got the Knights of Columbus in some ways do that, and in our Knights of Columbus, we got them in Webb City and 2 Joplin groups and Carthage and all that stuff. We got them all over the place. Knights of Columbus group. Again, a fraternal men's organization to help us to be better men. Exactly. And I was talking about that a couple weeks ago when we were talking with about that issue of trafficking. I said, how do we be better men? How do we encourage each other to be better men? And of course, for those of us in the Christian vein of things, how do we encourage each other to be men more like Jesus? How do we encourage each other to do those things? And I just think it's important that we stay after that because we need it. Yeah. We need to spur each other onto the good stuff.
And I think it provides hope to think there are people like you and me that walk this earth that they could do it. Now, can I do it? Can I live a virtuous life, Father Kapaun? I don't think so, but I can at least aspire to live that life. And I think once you get in touch with some of these saints' lives and those virtues you speak about, it begins to, when something comes up, you begin to go and ask yourself, what would Father Kapaun do in this situation? And that's when really the fruits of knowing who these people are as friends and people that went before us I think that's really where it bears the most fruit.
Well, and that's a term that we've also used, especially in older times. I mean, talking back centuries, that the saints were always our spiritual friends. Our spiritual friends who assisted us from the other side, who gave us example, who gave us encouragement, who gave us prayer and support, and all of those things. Again, it may be a strange concept for some, and the only reason, like I say, why I wanted to have you on was just to kind of talk about the reality. I think it's great that we've got local people now. I mean, the church, the Catholic Church in the U.S., just 200 years now. How do we continue to find those examples of the people who lived here and worked among us? Because that's how churches get these names: saint this, saint that, saint the other thing. Is again examples of virtue for all of us. And again, our story didn't just end with the scriptures, but the story continues to unfold out of those things. My guest this morning, Joe Dellasaga, who is part of Kapaun's Men. Father Emil Kapaun, a priest of Pilsen, Kansas. Pilsen. I knew I was getting it wrong. Yeah. Pilsner. There's where my brain is on a Sunday morning. That's not good. Okay, but at any rate, Pilsen, Kansas, a man of virtue who can give us some examples in life. We're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute. Don't go away. We'll be right back to wrap up.
Everyone on board dreamed of a new life in America. The Sisters of Mercy had a different dream: to serve all who had need. From the first hospital Sister Frances Ward built to the world's first virtual care center, we continue to answer the same call: to bring mercy home to you. Mercy, in every era, your life is our life's work. Learn why we serve at mercy.net/legacy. In Ireland, the first Sisters of Mercy were called the Walking Sisters because every day they went out in search of women and children who needed healing or help. Mercy continues to answer the same call, dedicated to the health of every woman who comes to us for care. Mercy, in every era, your life is our life's work. Learn why we serve at mercy.net/legacy.
Well, again, thanks for joining us on another Sunday morning. Thanks for sticking with me on another topic that may be seen as more Catholic. I try to mix all that up. If you think I'm getting too Catholic, you let me know. Okay, write in, call in, tell us. All right. But at any rate, we're talking this morning about people of virtue. And one of those was just a simple farm boy from eastern Kansas that kind of grew up and became a wonderful shining example for other people. His name was Father Emil Kapaun, and Kansas bred, taught in St. Louis, went on to be a priest, then into the Korean conflict, and just was an example of shining faith for so many, not just Catholics, but for any of the people that he served during his military chaplaincy. We can all be those people. And I want to encourage you to this day to try to be the best that you can be for your brothers and sisters. Join us next week for Faith in Our Hometown. Happy Sunday.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen Sunday mornings at 6:30 and 9 a.m. on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.